The first console war, Atari versus Intellivision, late 1970s, early 1980s. The very first true console rivalry began with the Atari 26,000 and the Mattel Intellivision. Atari had already carved out its place in history by popularizing video gaming at home with the 26,000. Released in 1977, it became a massive hit thanks to classics like Space Invaders and Adventure. For many families, Atari was the name synonymous with gaming. But then came Mattel with the Intellivision in 1980. Mattel saw an opportunity to steal market share and went on the offensive with one of the most aggressive advertising campaigns in gaming history. They ran TV commercials showing side-by-side comparisons, where Intellivision's sports games looked far more detailed than Atari's blocky counterparts. Their tagline might as well have been, "Why settle for less?" The fight between Atari and Intellivision showed for the first time how important technology and marketing could be. Although Atari ultimately outsold Mattel, Intellivision built a loyal fan base. This was the start of gamers picking sides and debating which console was better, a trend that continues to this day. The video game crash of 1983. Just as things were heating up, disaster struck. By the early 1980s, the market was flooded with consoles, low-effort titles, and poorly made knockoffs. The most infamous failure was Atari's rushed E.T. the Extraterrestrial game. Millions of copies went unsold, many ending up in a landfill in New Mexico. Gamers lost trust, retailers pulled back, and sales collapsed. The crash of 1983 nearly destroyed the gaming industry in North America. At its lowest point, experts were declaring video games a fad that would soon fade into history. But the war wasn't over. The crash cleared the battlefield for a new champion that would rise from Japan and reshape everything. Nintendo revives the industry, 1985 to early 1990s. In 1985, Nintendo entered the US market with the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, and the industry was reborn. The NES didn't just sell consoles, it rebuilt trust with players. Nintendo introduced the famous seal of quality, making sure only licensed, polished games were released. After years of shovelware, this made a huge difference. The NES brought iconic franchises like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid into millions of homes. Kids were obsessed, parents were reassured, and Nintendo became the new face of video games. For years, Nintendo faced almost no serious competition in North America. The NES sold over 60 million units worldwide, cementing itself as the king of the late 1980s. But Nintendo's dominance wouldn't go unchallenged for long. Nintendo versus Sega, the 16-bit console war, late 1980s to 1990s. This was the first true console war that gamers remember vividly. In 1989, Sega launched the Genesis, known as the Mega Drive, outside the US. Sega was bold, flashy, and determined to take Nintendo down. Their slogan, "Genesis does what Nintendo doesn't," was pure fire. Sega marketed itself as the cooler, edgier option for older kids and teens. The Genesis introduced Sonic the Hedgehog, a speedy, rebellious mascot designed to compete with Mario. Sega doubled down on sports games, arcade ports, and mature titles that Nintendo avoided. Meanwhile, Nintendo answered back in 1991 with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES, which boasted superior hardware, smoother graphics, and legendary titles like Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, and Super Metroid. This rivalry wasn't just about games, it was a cultural phenomenon. Kids argued at school about Mario versus Sonic. Commercials mocked the competition directly. Both companies sold tens of millions of consoles, pushing each other to innovate. The Sega versus Nintendo war defined the 90s, but as the industry moved into 3D, things were about to change again. The 32-bit war. PlayStation and Versus. Nintendo 64 versus Sega Saturn, mid-late 90s. By the mid-90s, gaming shifted into 3D. Sega tried to lead the way with the Saturn, but its complicated hardware and expensive price tag held it back. Nintendo launched the Nintendo 64 in 1996, delivering groundbreaking 3D titles like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. But Nintendo stuck with cartridges, which limited storage space and frustrated third-party developers. Enter Sony. With the PlayStation, Sony embraced CDs, which were cheaper to make and could hold more data. This attracted developers who wanted to create bigger, cinematic games. Titles like Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, and Gran Turismo turned PlayStation into a cultural powerhouse. By the end of the decade, the PlayStation had sold over 100 million units, crushing Sega and even surpassing Nintendo. A new king had arrived, Sega's last stand. Dreamcast versus PlayStation 2, 1999 to 2001. In 1999, Sega made one final attempt to reclaim the throne with the Dreamcast. It was ahead of its time, offering online multiplayer, a built-in modem, and innovative games like Shenmue, Soul Calibur, and Crazy Taxi. Fans adored it, but Sega's timing was terrible. In 2000, Sony released the PlayStation 2, and it became the best-selling console of all time, moving over 155 million units. Its secret weapon? DVD playback. At the time, a DVD player cost as much as a PlayStation 2, so millions of families bought one as their first DVD player and gaming console combined. The Dreamcast couldn't compete. By 2001, Sega abandoned the hardware business, retreating to focus solely on software. The console war now belonged to Sony, Nintendo, and a brand new challenger. The new three-way war, PlayStation 2 versus Xbox versus GameCube, 2001 to 2005. With Sega gone, Microsoft entered the battlefield with the original Xbox in 2001. Their big weapon was Halo. Combat evolved, which turned into a global phenomenon and made Xbox a serious competitor overnight. Xbox Live also revolutionized online gaming, setting the foundation for future generations. Meanwhile, Nintendo released the GameCube, which had great exclusives like Super Smash Bros. Melee and Metroid Prime, but struggled to keep up with Sony's momentum. Still, none could touch the PlayStation 2. Its massive library, third-party dominance, and multimedia features made it the undisputed winner of this generation. The HD console war, Xbox 360 versus PlayStation 3 versus Wii, 2005 to 2013. This was one of the most fascinating battles in gaming history. The Xbox 360 launched in 2005, gaining a one-year head start over Sony. Its strong online service, Xbox Live, made multiplayer gaming mainstream. Franchises like Halo 3, Gears of War, and Call of Duty dominated the era. Sony's PlayStation 3 stumbled out of the gate in 2006, with a $599 price tag and a late launch. But over time, exclusives like Uncharted, God of War 3, and The Last of Us helped it recover. Then came the Nintendo Wii, also in 2006, which changed the game entirely. With motion controls and a family-friendly design, it brought in millions of casual gamers. Wii Sports became one of the most played games in history. By the end, the Wii had outsold both rivals. This generation proved there were multiple paths to victory: hardcore dominance, multimedia power, or broad casual appeal. The modern war, PlayStation 4 versus Xbox One versus Nintendo Switch, 2013 to 2020s. In 2013, Sony and Microsoft clashed again. Microsoft's Xbox One stumbled with a confusing focus on TV integration, restrictive DRM, and a higher price. Gamers revolted and Sony capitalized with the PlayStation 4, branding it as for the players. The PS4 quickly became the leader, selling over 117 million units. Nintendo initially lagged with the Wii U, but in 2017, it came roaring back with the Nintendo Switch. Its hybrid design, working as both a handheld and a home console, was a stroke of genius. Titles like Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Animal Crossing. New Horizons turned it into a worldwide phenomenon. By the late 2000s and 10s, each company had carved out its lane. PlayStation for blockbuster exclusives, Xbox for services and online, and Nintendo for creativity and family appeal. The current generation, PlayStation 5 versus Xbox Series XXS versus Switch OLED, 2020 to present. Today's console war is still unfolding. The PlayStation 5 leads in sales thanks to exclusives like Spider-Man 2 and God of War Ragnarok, along with powerful hardware. The Xbox Series XS takes a different approach, pushing Game Pass as the Netflix of gaming. Instead of relying on traditional exclusives, Microsoft is betting on a subscription future where access matters more than ownership. And then there's the Nintendo Switch, still going strong even years after release with its OLED model keeping sales alive. Nintendo may not match Sony or Microsoft in raw power, but its first-party games remain some of the most beloved in the world. For the first time in history, each company seems to be thriving in its way,